Ohio State produces endless talent at the wide receiver spot, but with Brian Hartline leaving for USF, we might finally see that fall apart a bit. I highly doubt that, but for now, they have the best wide receiver in college football in Jeremiah Smith. I haven't really gotten a chance to do a feature on him, but today, I felt like it was finally time. We're to go through how Jeremiah Smith became a 5-star recruit, why he was the number 1 recruit in the country, and how good he has been for the Buckeyes in just about 2 years. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you can support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about the insane rise of Jeremiah Smith. So yeah, Ohio State's receivers coach Brian Hartline has recently recruited and developed players such as Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and most recently Marvin Harrison Jr. That is quite the resume he has, but Smith could be better than all of them. Going back in time, Jeremiah grew up in the Sunshine State of Florida, and he watched tons of receivers from his home state have great success at Alabama. That's why the Crimson Tide were apparently his favorite school growing up. That's an interesting fact. Smith was an insane athlete and always loved football and all different types of sports from the beginning. He's also built extremely tough and actually had football in his genetics, as his cousin was actually Geno Smith, the former West Virginia and current Seahawks starting quarterback. Smith credits his father for instilling a ton of maturity in him at a young age, and he said, quote, "I don't act my age and I act older than my age. A lot of people tell me that I don't act my age, but I'm way beyond my years, and I mean you have to be mature and not act like a kid." His head coach in high school was Damian Jones, and he's coached a lot of players during his time at Chaminade Madonna College Prep School. That was located in Hollywood, Florida, as recently he had blue-chip receiver Elijah Canion, who played at Auburn and Purdue, Miami running back Thad Franklin, and then Ohio State players Ryan Turner and Kenyatta Jackson Jr. He noticed something special in Jeremiah. He said, quote, "It's easy to coach guys that want to be the best. They never stop working, and he's that type and just never stops going." In Smith, he saw a receiver who was never satisfied, as eventually he blew up to be 6'3" and was noticed from 7th grade on. He had insane hands and would transfer to Chaminade Madonna High School as a sophomore. Luckily, he also had a great quarterback throwing him the ball, as blue-chip quarterback recruit Cedric Bailey was his quarterback, and he's currently now at NC State. He also had another receiver in the rotation to help distract him, as 4-star Miami freshman JoJo Trader was also his teammate. In 2 seasons for the Lions, Smith had 84 catches for 1,600 yards and 26 touchdowns, averaging 81.5 yards per game. He ended up showing off his explosive hands and his catch radius, as he just went crazy and helped them go 13-0. They won a state championship, and from there he got offers from more than 20 early programs. That included Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, LSU, and pretty much every school under the sun. It looked like, though, it would come down to Ohio State and then Florida and Miami, but ultimately he was going to choose what was best for him. His head coach never steered Smith in any sort of direction, saying he encouraged the receiver to do his own research and do what interested him and find the best fit. He then said that Smith made his mind up on Ohio State a few months ago, and then he eventually committed to the Buckeyes. Why the Buckeyes? Well, Jeremiah said, quote, "I enjoyed Coach Hartline and how he explained the releases and everything. I loved the city, and I loved everything about OSU. It meant a lot to get the offer, and it was one of my favorite schools growing up." From that point on, his head coach never saw a change in Smith, though. He was still in the weight room just as much, was running track, and doing whatever it took to be the best wide receiver in the country. But eventually there was some noise that Smith would flip to another school. Buckeyes fans were on pins and needles, as every time Smith took a visit to another school, many people were kind of worried. Even though there was insane depth and talent at Ohio State, Ryan Day could not lose a talent this special. Smith said, quote, "I'm locked in. I'm not going anywhere." But there was a lot of people who were concerned about that. There was a good reason why schools were doing everything they could to flip him. As his coach said, quote, "He's a perfectionist and likes to do everything the right way, which is uncanny for his age." So why was Smith visiting other places if he was so locked into Ohio State? Well, he said, quote, "I'm just enjoying the process. If you were in my shoes, you'd love the recruiting process as well. It's fun, you're 17 years old, and you want to have a good time." Eventually, he was a finalist for the Max Preps National Player of the Year, an Army All-American, and won every single award possible. He affirmed his commitment to Ohio State and was listed as the #1 player in the country. He would be the first wide receiver to be the #1 recruit in the country since Dorial Green Beckham, and the 3rd ever behind DGB and Percy Harvin. One game during his senior year really showed his talent, as it wasn't even halftime yet and he already had 3 touchdown catches against Lakewood. He became the nation's top high school football player, and he was truly a record-breaking player. Recruiting analyst Larry Bluestein said, quote, "In terms of high school level in state, he's top 3 of all time. That's pretty crazy for the state of Florida, which produces unbelievable amounts of football talent." In his final home game, he ended up catching 11 passes for 170 yards and a touchdown, and in total he had over 3,000 yards and 45 touchdowns during his career, and Ohio State fans were super pumped to see what he could do. According to 24/7 Sports, Smith was a 5-star recruit, the #1 receiver, and the #1 player in the class of 2024. So how did he end up doing at Ohio State? Well, let's take a look. So obviously Ohio State has been producing big-time receivers, and last year Marvin Harrison Jr. ended up becoming an All-American and ended up going in the top 5 to the Arizona Cardinals. Everyone was wondering who's going to be the next up for Ohio State, and the main guy was probably going to be Emeka Egbuka. He was a former 5-star recruit coming out of the state of Washington, and he was next man up. Julian Fleming had left for Penn State, and other guys such as Brandon Inniss and Carnell Tate were also expected to step up. The wide receiver room was extremely talented, but everyone was still talking about Smith. Some Ohio State fans were placing crazy expectations on him. He'd only been on campus for 3 months, and many were saying he could be the leading receiver for the Buckeyes. Many thought he would break every freshman receiving record in the book, and it's entirely possible that he would, but that's kind of high stakes for a kid who's just 18 years old. He said, quote, "Pressure? No, I don't really feel pressure at all. I just want to go out there and play football and win games. I mean, I know all the hype around me was crazy coming in, and I just wanted to come in and be the guy who's coming into work, not be about all the hype." Pretty soon he impressed people all around Ohio State, as Smith became the only Ohio State player to lose his black stripe within the first 4 spring practices. He showed signs in his spring game that he was going to be able to live up to all the hype, but unfortunately he still was a little bit underwhelming in that, but again, it's just a glorified scrimmage and no one really actually cares. Smith was obviously being talked about a ton in the media, and this past weekend, he had a great debut. At this point, he's showing all the signs that he'll probably be able to live up to the hype and become one of the most accomplished Ohio State receivers ever. He ended up leading the team with 6 catches for 92 yards and 2 total touchdowns, one of which showed off his extreme athleticism. New quarterback Will Howard seems to really like Smith, and with him trying to settle in there, Smith could be his go-to guy, and this is huge for them. The #2 Buckeyes crushed Akron 52-6, and Ohio State looks to be in a really good spot. The one question mark on this team was who was going to be wide receiver 1, and Smith might be able to answer that question. Ohio State has a tremendous running back room with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, an experienced quarterback, a great defense, and a good line, so really they just needed one playmaker to step up. Ryan Day's seen plenty of great receivers come and go, but even he couldn't help but marvel over Smith. He became the first Ohio State freshman to catch 2 passes in a season opener since 1996, and Day said, quote, "He's built different. Just the way he approaches things is different. You can see it in his size and speed, but typically someone with that type of talent doesn't have the discipline and focus to do what he does. Sometimes you look at him and you don't think he's quite human, but he is. He's going to make a few early mistakes, but not many." That's a pretty good summary of how good Jeremiah Smith is. He seemingly has the physical traits of a guy like Dorial Green Beckham, but not the mental scruples and mental problems that he had. As a Mizzou fan, DGB had all the potential in the world, but he just couldn't quite put it all together, as he relied too much on his athleticism and natural athletic gifts. Smith, on the other hand, is trying to be the best he can, while already being better than everyone else athletically. Smith, without a doubt, was not a flash in the pan, as he would continue the 2024 season as the best player in the country in some people's eyes. He had 5 catches for 119 yards and a touchdown against Western Michigan, had a touchdown against Marshall, a touchdown against Michigan State, and a touchdown against Iowa. Ohio State was 5-0 going into a game against #3 Oregon, and while Smith had 9 catches for 100 yards and a score, they would lose by 1. From there, Smith continued on as he had a score against Nebraska, 4 catches against Penn State, and then a touchdown against Purdue. To finish the year, he had 100 yards against Northwestern, had 3 catches against Indiana, and then against Michigan, he had a score, but they somehow lost. Some wondered if they'd be left out of the playoff, but they were not. And he would get redemption in their first round game against Tennessee. In that matchup, he had the game of the year so far, as he had 6 catches for 103 yards and 2 touchdowns. He'd then get revenge against #1 Oregon, having 7 catches for 187 yards and 2 touchdowns. Ohio State was absolutely rolling, and despite having just 1 catch against Texas, they would win that game. In the national championship, Smith would catch 5 passes for 88 yards and a score, and it brought his grand total to 76 catches for 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns. He was absolutely insane, and some thought he could be a top 3 draft pick if he was able to declare as a freshman. Going into 2025, we heard endless hype about him, and so far, he's been good. He had 6 catches in a win over #1 Texas, 2 touchdowns against Grambling, and then 153 yards and a touchdown against Ohio. He had a touchdown on the road against Washington, 2 at home against Minnesota, and 1 on the road against Illinois. He continues to be a touchdown machine, as he had nearly 100 yards against Wisconsin, 123 yards and 2 scores against Penn State, and 137 yards and a touchdown against Purdue. While he had been banged up with an injury the last couple of weeks, he would catch a crucial touchdown in a win on the road against Michigan, and while some thought it was controversial, it was clear it was a score. So far, Jeremiah has 72 catches for 942 yards and 11 touchdowns, and he's continuing on as one of the best players in the country, and he's made a couple superhuman catches. He is truly a human highlight reel, and I'm excited to see how he's going to do in the playoff this year and tomorrow against Indiana. He's one of the best prospects we've ever seen, and his future is bright, and he'll probably be the #1 overall pick in the 2027 NFL Draft. But what do you guys think? How good do you think Jeremiah Smith is, and who should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.